It started with a trajectory no one expected, an object small, cold, silent, curving in from interstellar space on a path that didn't just intersect the solar system. It began matching us. 3I Atlas, once dismissed as another eccentric comet, then quietly reclassified as non-gravitational. But now, the numbers are too precise to ignore. It's not swinging past. It's falling into sync. New orbital models, released by the International Astrodynamics Union, confirm the unthinkable. 3I Atlas is gradually shifting into an Earth-trailing position. No flyby, no escape trajectory, no burn into deep space. It is now officially on track to enter Earth's orbital corridor, shadowing us in a high, perfectly timed resonance. And it's not behaving like a comet anymore. There's no coma flare near the Sunday, no expected spin, no dust signature consistent with known interstellar fragments. Instead, it decelerates at regular intervals. It pulses light at Fibonacci ratios. It stays visible far longer than thermal models allow. And more than that, it adapts. Amateur astronomers have reported slight orientation changes, subtle, coordinated, smooth, as if it is adjusting to us. But this isn't about data anymore. It's about a presence. Because if it was just a rock, it would have passed. If it was just a comet, it would have burned. Instead, it waits. And so the question deepens. What kind of intelligence announces itself not with sound, but with timing? What kind of message arrives not in language, but in orbit? And are we really seeing it for the first time? Or recognizing something we've forgotten? This is the story of a curve too precise to be random, a silence too patient to be passive, and a presence so elegant it doesn't break physics, it bends attention. Stay with me. This isn't science fiction. This is happening now. And it's happening slowly enough that only the awake are noticing. Leave a comment telling me what time it is and where you are, because the object is near, and it's not asking for belief. It's asking for witnesses. It begins with a flicker, just that, a single deviation in a stream of numbers no wider than a hair on a satellite dish. But when that deviation repeated, again and again, across ground-based observatories in Chile, Hawaii, and the Canary Islands, someone finally ran the cross-check, and that is when the silence changed shape. What had been drifting, harmless, icy, was now aimed. 3I, Atlas, once a celestial curiosity, then an atmospheric saboteur over Mars, had altered course again, not slightly, not subtly, but directly. It is now on track to intersect with Earth's orbital corridor in a time frame too short to explain and too long to deny. Not a collision, but a flyby that breaches thresholds of comfort, of protocol, of evolutionary memory. You were not supposed to notice it, but here you are. The early warning system that finally caught this trajectory change didn't come from NASA. It came from a small team at the Indian Institute of Astrophysics. A student researcher reran the orbital model on a whim, curious about why the coma of 3I Atlas showed fluctuating density at a distance where nothing should be evaporating. What they found was an alteration in vector that violated inertial logic, not a push from Jupiter, not a slingshot around the Sunday, a bend like a swimmer turning mid-stroke in open water. This is not how comets move. This is how craft behave. The European Southern Observatory called for an immediate reclassification. The Minor Planets Center issued an update to its designation, but stopped short of assigning it an artificial origin tag. Yet the data speaks its own language. The object is decelerating in rhythm. It is adjusting pitch. It is shedding symmetrical vapor trails in a formation that can only be described as elegant. As of 12 days ago, 3I Atlas entered what mission specialists now call controlled drift. Its projected path curves inward, lining up with a trajectory that places it within observational range of Earth's upper thermosphere by March of next year. No previous interstellar object, Oumuamua, Borisov, or the unidentified fragments from the AUKUS outliers, has displayed this level of navigational refinement. This is no longer a visitor, it is an arrival. And what makes this development more disturbing is that someone somewhere has been waiting for this moment. Declassified logs from the Space Fence monitoring grid reveal something chilling. There was a suppression protocol already coded for this eventuality, not for asteroid impact, not for solar flares, but for interstellar object, Earth vector, intercept, Class B, a euphemism so bland it disguises the panic underneath. The logs refer to a standing order known only as Volt Resolution, a directive to cease all public transmission of trajectory data if the object enters Earth-adjacent velocity. We are now there. You may ask, what could an object like this do to a planet like ours? But that's the wrong question. The real question is, what could a presence like this want from a civilization like ours? Because whatever 3I Atlas is, it is not a fragment of rock on a casual drift. It is a signal wrapped in substance, a mechanism with memory, a being or a beacon crossing not just space, but narrative, and it is rewriting ours. At the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, scientists have been quietly studying its emission spectrum. What they found shouldn't exist. A repeating modulation, pulsing every 11 minutes and 42 seconds, across a band previously thought to be background noise. When converted into audio, it forms a harmonic series, 5 tones. One of them matches a vibrational mode found in ancient Sumerian temples, designed to echo the breath of the earth. Coincidence? Or choreography? There is growing speculation among independent physicists that the trajectory change may be linked to Earth's magnetosphere fluctuations, meaning it adjusted course, not because we detected it, but because we invited it. A kind of resonance lock, as if we tuned a planetary chord, and something out there heard it and came closer. A whisper from below, a descent from beyond. 3I Atlas is now less than 4 astronomical units away. That is inside the orbit of Jupiter. At its current deceleration, it will match Earth's orbital speed within 1 lunar cycle, which raises the next impossible question. Is it preparing for synchronous orbit? Because, if it is, the implications are staggering. In science fiction, objects like this are often warships, emissaries, or time capsules. But this one feels older, stranger. Its albedo, its reflectivity, is increasing by a geometric factor. Not because it's shedding mass, but because it is aligning panels, surfaces, angles, geometry with intent. And as the reflectivity rises, so does something else. Reports are emerging of animals acting strangely in regions where Atlas is most visible during twilight hours. Herd migration shifts, birds veering off course, dogs howling precisely every 23 minutes in synchrony with the object's radio frequency emissions. No one is connecting the dots out loud, but everyone is watching. You're watching too. Even now, even here, but you feel it more than see it. A pressure at the edges of the mind, a stirring in the evolutionary basement of your species. Not fear, something deeper, recognition. Because this has happened before. The Hopi remember the blue star Kachina. The Dogon speak of the visitors from Sirius. The Aborigines whisper of Wandjina sky beings who controlled water and sound. All these myths, scattered across geography and time, describe the same moment. Something in the sky that was not a star, and yet moved like one, arrived like one, taught like one, judged like one. What if 3i Atlas is not here to harm, but to reveal? Not a destroyer, not a savior, but a mirror? And what if we are not ready for what it reflects? Leave a comment. Tell me what time it is where you are, and what you see in the night sky. Because tonight, the stars are watching us back. There is a point in orbital mechanics where every answer becomes a question in disguise. When you trace a path through space like the arc of a comet, a spacecraft, or a cloud of debris, you expect that motion to obey certain rules. Mass follows mass. Speed is governed by gravity. Nothing moves without a force, and every force must leave a fingerprint. But 3i Atlas is now moving in a way that does not leave fingerprints, or perhaps it leaves them in a language we do not yet understand. The first detailed acceleration logs came from the Japanese Hinode Solar Observatory, not a comet tracker, not even a planetary science instrument. It's a solar physics platform designed to observe coronal mass ejections. But in late August, it caught a glimpse of Atlas crossing a background flare. And in those few seconds, the data revealed something disturbing. The object had changed speed gently, minutely, and with mathematical smoothness. No plume, no outgassing, no thermal signature, no visible thrust, just an adjustment, like a turn of the wrist. That was the first clue that something was off. NASA's NEOWISE mission tried to replicate the detection. Its infrared arrays focused on the same segment of Atlas's arc, measuring the residual heat patterns from any active venting. What they found was even stranger. Surface temperatures inconsistent with solar heating models. Not hotter, but colder. Parts of the object appeared to resist solar warming, as if shielded. It was as though it had the ability to redirect or absorb energy in ways no known material should. That's not a comet. That's a choice. In the weeks that followed, more anomalies surfaced. The Gaia Observatory, a star mapping mission located at the Lagrange 2 point, was able to resolve the object's photometric signature across multiple wavelengths. What should have been a chaotic scatter of reflected sunlight, typical for a tumbling icy body, was instead a tight, periodic flicker, regular, rhythmic, synchronized to a rotational period of 5 hours and 26 minutes. Spin implies structure. Structure implies design. The object is not just moving, it's orienting, adjusting its alignment relative to the ecliptic, as if seeking a particular window of interaction. This is not just navigation, it's choreography. And as every new layer of data emerges, the question deepens. If this is a natural object, why does it move like it has intent? One answer came quietly hidden in a technical bulletin circulated within the European Space Agency's Planetary Defense Division. It warned of a detection echo observed near the asteroid belt, something trailing 3i Atlas by nearly 4 million kilometers, too far to be a debris field, too tight to be coincidence. Whatever it is, it's following in formation. No one will say the word probe out loud, but the math whispers it. This trailing signature appears and vanishes in observational sweeps. Not always visible, not always consistent, but often enough to suggest it is not a background object. One hypothesis, it is reflective only under certain solar angles. Another, it is partially cloaked by refractive layering dust, gas, or perhaps a field effect we do not yet have language for. Which brings us to the emissions problem. On September 18th, the SETI Institute's Allen Telescope Array registered an unusual series of pulses in the Q band. centered near 17.2 gigahertz. These were not radio transmissions in the traditional sense. There was no message, no modulation, just a pulse, then silence, then another, 5 in total, spaced by the golden ratio, 13 minutes, 8 minutes, 5, 3, 2, the Fibonacci cadence. No natural source is known to produce signal intervals in that sequence. Not pulsars, not flares, not quasars. And yet, there it was, coming from the same celestial coordinates as 3I Atlas. SETI has not issued an official statement, but one insider, speaking anonymously to a European astronomy journal, admitted that this was the most orderly non-message we've ever recorded. And that may be the key, because if you were designing a first contact protocol, not to transmit language, but to confirm intelligence, this is how you might do it. Not with words, but with math. With the unmistakable fingerprint of pattern recognition, a universal constant encoded in silence. Now we look at the anomaly stack. You know the pattern, 1 or 2 strange behaviors, and you have a curiosity, 5 or 6, and you have a statistical outlier. But we are past that now. We are in the realm of predictive strangeness, where each new observation doesn't just surprise us, but confirms our expectation of being surprised. You've seen this pattern in nature before. Octopuses solving puzzles, birds navigating magnetic fields, ant colonies organizing without a leader. Intelligence isn't always loud. It doesn't always leave symbols and words behind. Sometimes it emerges from the silence between predictable steps, from how the system resists randomness just enough to make you look twice. That is what 3I Atlas is doing now. It resists randomness. The object is on a hyperbolic orbit. That's what the textbooks say. But more recent analysis from the University of Bern suggests the path is flattening. Not enough to bind it gravitationally, not yet, but enough to place it on the cusp. If it performs another maneuver, however subtle, it could become bound. Not just visiting, staying, permanently. And here's the unnerving part. Earth will be at its closest point to Atlas when that bound state becomes possible. Late December, just past the solstice, when the planet tilts its darkest face toward the stars and waits. That cannot be a coincidence. Or rather, it could be. But how many stacked coincidences does it take to cross the line? You're living that question now. The Air Force has quietly updated its hazard posture for high orbit trajectories. Ground telescopes in South Africa have been assigned new tracking algorithms. A French aerospace startup, formerly focused on asteroid mining, has filed an internal patent for adaptive energy shielding against low-orbit interstellar reflections. The rumor mill is loud, and in the center of it, 3I Atlas continues to glide. It doesn't blink. It doesn't explain. It just moves like it was always going to. Like this was part of a long, long journey. Like Earth was never just a stop on the way, but the destination. What would it mean for everything you know if it was? It is not the first time something like this has come close. You've heard of Oumuamua. You've studied Borisov. You may even know the silent lineage of long-period comets stretching back through Babylonian records and Inuit sky myths. But 3I Atlas belongs to a different class, not just because it came from beyond the stars, but because it behaves as if it remembers the stars it passed. And perhaps us. The indigenous astronomers of Australia speak of the Wandjina, cloud beings that descended from the sky during the dream time. They were said to be lightless stars that guided, not with fire, but with silence. In Colombia, the Muisca people tell of a sky serpent that curved through the heavens every few centuries, stopping near Earth only when the stars aligned with the lake of their ancestors. These were not idle stories. They were calendars disguised as poetry, measurements hidden inside metaphors, and hidden within those metaphors were orbits. Somewhere in the Lon Mosque archive, a now decommissioned Soviet deep space radar station in Siberia, is a digitized reel, marked only by the numbers 1959. It was never publicly released, but researchers who've seen the data claim it contained a fast-moving object entering the solar system from the same approximate direction as 3I Atlas Cepheus. The object's albedo was anomalous, its apparent deceleration unnatural, and then it vanished. Back then, they blamed the equipment, a glitch, a satellite echo, but the coordinates were precise, and now they match. The United Kingdom's Jodrell Bank Observatory also recorded a near-identical signal during the 1977 WOW signal window. Not a full transmission, just a momentary flutter on an unused band. The angle was off by 12 arc minutes, but the drift, speed, and inbound trajectory lined up with what Atlas now displays. Of course, we didn't know what we were seeing then. We barely understand it now. What if this object has passed before? And what if we just didn't know how to look? Ancient Chinese star charts mention guest stars, brief appearances of bright objects near known constellations that linger for weeks before vanishing again. Most were novae, some were supernovae. But one, noted during the reign of Emperor Jing of Han, was unlike the rest. It appeared with a green hue, lacked a tail, and was said to shimmer as a blade ripples in water. The year, 147 before the Common Era. The coordinates, just shy of the current Atlas path. It would have passed silently, seen only by a few, remembered by fewer, and categorized as myth by all who came later, because that's what we do. When we don't understand, we reframe it as story, and yet the stories remain, and they point in one direction. Now take a breath and imagine this. What if 3I Atlas is not a comet, but a cycle? Something that returns, something that loops through time, not just space. Something with an orbit so vast that it takes centuries to complete, crossing star systems like stepping stones, mapping each one with subtle instruments buried beneath a mantle of ice and dust. And each time it passes Earth, it triggers a ripple, a nudge, a myth, a warning, or maybe an invitation. Let's revisit 1908, Tunguska, Siberia, a blast so powerful it flattened over 2,000 square kilometers of forest, yet left no crater, no known impactor, no metal fragments, just scorched trees and an atmospheric riddle that's never been fully solved. Some said it was a comet fragment, others proposed antimatter or black holes or methane pockets. But one theory, buried in Cold War secrecy, hinted at something different, an object that passed too close, an atmospheric skim, a near miss, one that curved away without impact, leaving only shock and silence in its wake. The inbound trajectory, also from the general direction of Cepheus, the same region, the same timing, almost exactly 117 years ago. Now consider this. What if 3I Atlas is the return of that object? Or if not the same, then a sibling, part of a pattern we've never recognized because we were never meant to. Because to see the pattern is to admit that something has been watching us across time, not from above, but from within the fabric of the sky itself. And this is where things grow stranger still. A recent FOIA release from the United States Naval Observatory details a classified initiative called Echo Arc, a project launched in the early 1980s to study anomalous orbital echoes in near-Earth space. Buried in the documents is an internal memo from a Dr. Richard Hemsworth, astrophysicist and consultant to the project. It contains a line that no one in mainstream astronomy has been able to explain. If the Cepheid fragment returns again, and its timing matches the Earth resonance window, then the protocol outlined in Project Sandclock must be followed without deviation. There is no public record of Project Sandclock, but the name implies what we're now beginning to suspect, that this is timed, that this was always timed. That 3-eye atlas is arriving on schedule. It echoes the rhythms of great cycles: precession, glaciation, magnetic reversal, even mass extinction. Events that seem random until viewed over spans too long for human memory. But not too long for a machine, not too long for something that doesn't forget. It may be why its behavior is so precise, why its trajectory feels fine-tuned, because it was already calculated, already coded, not to impact, but to remind. Perhaps this object has been here before, not as a warning, but as a witness, watching our rise, marking our alignment, returning now, not because it was drawn in by gravity or chance, but because we have reached the next phase, technologically, cognitively, spiritually. You feel it, don't you? The strangeness in the air, the sense of being noticed, and maybe of being remembered. Zoom out, zoom far, far out, until Earth is a blinking marble in the glare of the Sunday, until the orbit of 3-eye Atlas becomes not a curve in the sky, but a dance line carved into space-time itself. From this distance, there is no panic, no headlines, just geometry, just an equation still unfolding. But equations, like visitors, carry implications, and the trajectory of 3-eye Atlas now charts a path that is no longer a mere flyby. It is a braiding, a harmonic interlock with Earth's position not once, not briefly, but cyclically, not intersecting directly, but syncing its approach with a pattern that grows more entangled with each deceleration, not unlike a pendulum being caught by a larger gravitational pulse and swinging back with intent. The sun is the conductor, the planets are the notes, but this is a counterpoint we didn't write. Astrophysicists from Caltech and the Max Planck Institute ran the simulations last week. Not public ones, quiet, internal. They took into account the new mass estimate over 33 billion tons, more than 5,000 times heavier than Oumuamua, and the subtle course shifts tracked by space-based infrared sensors. The result? Atlas is now on a returnable vector. If it decelerates once more, no more than 3% of its current inbound speed, it will become trapped in a heliocentric orbit, one that intersects Earth's orbital plane at least twice every 34 months. That number is not chosen. That number is encoded. 34 months is almost exactly the average interval between solar maximums and geomagnetic quiet. It's a rhythm the Earth knows, the Sun knows, and perhaps Atlas knows too. Because gravity is not just pull, it is language, and Atlas is speaking fluently. There is an old theory forgotten, fringe, and now resurrected, called gravitational resonance mapping. The idea is that massive objects entering a star system can use planetary alignments to read the layout of that system, not just in terms of mass, but habitability, life, civilization. By measuring the gravitational flux across known orbits, the visitor could detect anomalies in density, heat emission, even synthetic electromagnetic fields. In other words, it could sense us. 3-eye Atlas is following a trajectory that loops through every major planetary orbit: Venus, Mars, Earth, even Mercury, though distantly. It has touched the gravitational signature of each world, like fingers pressing the keys of a silent piano. And now, on its arc inward, it adjusts not to avoid, but to return, as though mapping wasn't enough, as though presence was required. The James Webb Space Telescope, observing in the mid-infrared, detected something staggering: periodic flares in the object's coma, at intervals of 188 minutes. These are not heat spikes, they are spectral shifts, as if the surface, whatever lies beneath the frosted shell, is changing composition in rhythm. Reflectivity patterns now resemble engineered materials. Refractive indexes too tight. Thermal emission decay too clean. This is not a comet trying to stay frozen. It is something cooling on purpose. You see, there's a difference between surviving in space and preparing for arrival. In August, ESA's Gaia probe captured photometric echoes that ripple outward from the object like sonar. Not loud, not bright, but methodical like an active scan. The pulses are non-radio, not optical. They ride on the fabric of space-time itself, gravitational microbursts, akin to gravitational lensing events, but far subtler, only detectable by watching background stars flicker with a whisper. What kind of natural object scans the sky behind it? And why now? One possibility is benign. It is cataloging, gathering starlight fingerprints to orient itself. A cosmic compass, realigning for the next maneuver. But there is another interpretation, quietly circulated in a classified briefing prepared by the U.S. Space Force's Advanced Threat Detection Division. The report suggests Atlas may be looking for something, not us, but another object, a relay, a signal, a satellite, long since forgotten, or perhaps never found. Something left in our system long ago by a prior pass, now waiting to be reawakened. A gravitational handshake that needs two hands. And Atlas may be the second. And yet, from the cosmic perspective, this isn't invasion. It isn't even interference. It is choreography. There are civilizations, hypothetically, that map systems not by light but by gravity, who listen for the bends and warps in space like we listen to notes in a melody. To them, Earth may already be singing, microwave leakage from broadcast towers, satellite constellations blinking through low orbit, radio pulses bouncing from every hemisphere. If you plotted Earth's noise in the gravitational spectrum, it would form a lopsided chime, maybe even a pattern, maybe even a call, and Atlas may be the response. Now consider the implications of what Avi Loeb has suggested in recent weeks, that this object did not arrive by accident, but by design, that its fine-tuned entry, its timing at perihelion, aligned perfectly with Earth's position behind the Sun, was chosen for concealment, to alter course without detection, a maneuver made not in haste, but in elegance, as if the Sun itself were used as a cloak. In other words, a blind spot, chosen tactically, because even from the cosmic scale, stealth has meaning. So what does it mean when an object with this much mass, this much intelligence of motion, begins aligning with a planet like ours? What does it imply when it returns not by chance, but by pattern? It means that we are being seen. It means we are part of a story we didn't know we were telling. And that realization is what shifts this from scientific anomaly to cosmic encounter. Because it's no longer about what Atlas is, it's about where it's going. And now, we know where that is. Here, again. So look up, slowly, and understand that gravity isn't just what pulls planets towards stars. It's what pulls stories toward meaning, what pulls encounters toward revelation. And in this moment, as the stars tighten their geometry and the sky prepares to fold, you are part of that meaning. You sit under the sky tonight with the weight of knowing. Somewhere out there, a slow-moving sentinel is adjusting its approach, not wildly, not chaotically, but deliberately, like a spacecraft easing into port after a long, calculated voyage. And as you breathe in the quiet, a new thought arrives, heavier than gravity. What if it isn't just watching? What if it's studying the watchers? 3i Atlas has now passed into a realm of human awareness that few celestial objects ever reach, not because it's close, but because it's intimate. It is no longer distant data. It has crossed the line between external curiosity and internal confrontation. The question is no longer, what is it? The question is, what does it see in us? That shift changes everything. For most of our history, we projected outward. We sent questions toward the stars, like bottles on the tide. SETI, Voyager, Arecibo, all hopeful messages packed with mathematics and Mozart, etched plaques and encoded dreams. But now the tide comes in, and the mirror floats back. What does 3i Atlas know about us that we've forgotten? From its current position, the object is seeing Earth in full spectral glory, our biosphere pulsing with chlorophyll fluorescence, the nitrogen-rich haze of our atmosphere glowing under ultraviolet, the soft scatter of artificial lights mapping every continent. But more than that, it sees pattern. It sees heat where there should be cold, order where there should be chaos. It sees cities breathing, oceans shifting, technology orbiting. It sees us clearly, unmistakably, as an anomaly, not just biological, but technological, intentional. If Atlas is what some now propose, a kind of time-traveling archive, a seeded probe, a pan-galactic listener, then it already knows the signs of civilization. And in us, it sees a species balanced precariously between emergence and entropy, a threshold species, and the timing, again, is impossible to ignore. In the past 100 Earth years, a blink in cosmic time, we've detonated atomic weapons, landed on the moon, created machine intelligences, built a satellite web that blankets our sky, and connected billions of human minds with invisible threads of information. We have become bright, loud, fast. From a cosmic perspective, we've lit a beacon. The Kardashev scale, first proposed by Soviet astrophysicist Nikolai Kardashev in 1964, measures civilizations by their energy use. We're still at type 0 barely, but we're accelerating. And some speculate that civilizations crossing that boundary become detectable not just by radio or light, but by gravitational anomalies, by the structure of their planetary orbit, by the temperature of their upper atmosphere. Atlas may be the answer to that moment, a watcher that arrives when the volume gets too high. And yet, it has not spoken, not openly, not in a way we can decode. It has not halted our satellites, triggered alerts, or caused visible panic. Its approach has been slow, patient, precise, which raises the strangest and most human question of all. Does it care? Because if it does, then it is not just observing us, it is judging. And if it doesn't, then perhaps that is more terrifying. The possibility that we are irrelevant, or worse, that we are understood so completely we require no further interaction, as if we are already known, already categorized, already filed away. But maybe, just maybe, this is a test, not of intelligence, but of character. In his 1973 paper, The Reflection Hypothesis, British philosopher Ian Corrick proposed that the first contact between civilizations would not be marked by communication, but by confrontation with the self. That the act of being seen by another intelligence forces the subject to examine what it shows. You cannot hide when the sky is looking back, and so the reflections begin. We look at Atlas, and we see not just data, we see implications. If it was built, then who built it? If it is ancient, then how ancient? If it is intelligent, then how vast must its understanding be? And what does that mean for us still arguing, still burning, still fearing shadows on cave walls? Atlas reveals our scale. It shrinks us, but it also sharpens us, because in its quiet, there is no threat, only presence, and that presence forces an inventory. Are we peaceful, curious? Do we cooperate, create, destroy? Are we worthy of the attention of something that has drifted across the gulfs between stars just to arrive here now? Or are we still infants under starlight, clumsy in our reach, reckless in our rhythm? Think of how many civilizations may have burned themselves out before reaching this moment. How many grew loud, too fast, too soon, and vanished in the echo? Perhaps Atlas is the silence left behind when one of those failed. A recorder, a last message, a warning wrapped in orbit. Or perhaps it is hope, a guide left behind for the next world that flickers too brightly to ignore. A kind of cosmic therapist, arriving not with answers, but with presence, saying nothing, judging nothing, just being there, long enough for us to see ourselves clearly. So, what do we do now? Do we panic, hide, weaponize the sky, or do we learn to listen to the earth, to ourselves, to the silence behind Atlas's patient spiral? Because how we respond will write the next line of our story. And maybe, just maybe, that's why it came at all. In the stillness of early morning, when the cities have dimmed and even the oceans seem to hush their breath, the sky above remains unchanged. And yet, you know something is out there. A dark companion on a sunlit voyage, drifting, waiting, nearing, but not yet speaking. This is the silence we never expected. Three-Eye Atlas does not scream across the heavens. It does not flash. It does not demand. Instead, it approaches with restraint, like a guest who arrives early and chooses to wait outside, watching your windows before knocking, the kind of silence that suggests awareness and patience. And in that silence, something even deeper has begun to stir. The realization that we may not be alone, not just in the universe, but in our moment. Scientists at the Vatican Observatory have quietly resumed their historical program of stellar listening, not for signals in the radio band, but for silence itself, structured absence. They're re-examining records not for what was said, but what ceased. Moments in time where the sky seemed to pause. And in reviewing those gaps, they found a troubling pattern. Every major comet, with inexplicable behavior, in the last 3 centuries, arrived during periods of cultural inflection. Years when human thought pivoted. Years when great wars ended, or great discoveries began. Coincidence? Or something watching us through our turning points? The Great Silence, as coined by Enrico Fermi, was originally a paradox. If intelligent life is common, where is everyone? But Atlas offers a darker twist. What if the silence is not a lack of response, but a deliberate phase of contact? One in which presence comes before voice, like a therapist sitting in the room, waiting for the patient to speak first. The SETI Institute's latest unpublished internal bulletin refers to this new phase as contact latency, a strategic delay before communication, designed to allow the observed to process its awareness. In the words of one anonymous contributor, We are not waiting for them to talk. They are waiting to see if we will understand the question. That question, of course, remains undefined, because it lives inside the gap, the quiet spiral of 3i Atlas as it crosses into Earth's orbital corridor without sound or signal. Because maybe the message isn't embedded in data at all. Maybe the message is the object, the way it moves, the way it slows, the way it chooses not to rush. As if to say, I'm not here to conquer, I'm here to witness. We are used to being the noisy ones, the flashbang civilization, sending probes into space and blasting digital chatter in all directions. But Atlas does not mirror our energy. It counters it, not with aggression, but with stillness. And that stillness is disarming. For decades, science fiction told us first contact would be a spectacle, a beam of light, a disk descending, a news event. But the real version, if this is what's happening, looks nothing like that. It is not cinematic. It is patient, subtle, almost humble, and that is precisely why it unsettles us. Because it doesn't need to impress us. It is already beyond us in its restraint. Now let's talk about the latest anomaly, one not measured in data, but in dreams. Anecdotal reports have surfaced in northern Norway, the Tibetan Plateau, and remote stretches of the Atacama. Individuals claiming to have seen an eye in the sky, not during waking hours, but in sleep. Dreams of orbiting shapes, geometries too perfect to be imagined, and a feeling, not fear, but awe, a presence that radiates knowing. This is unscientific, yes, but history is full of moments where dreams precede understanding. Kekule's vision of the benzene ring, Mendeleev's arrangement of the periodic table. What if Atlas is not just shaping our skies, but also tuning our subconscious? This silence is not empty. It is a field, a pressure, a lens, and we are the ones being brought into focus. There is a reason NASA's Deep Space Network has quietly redirected its listening array toward the object, even though it emits no known signal. Engineers have configured the dishes for passive Doppler resonance capture, listening not to frequency, but to mass vibrations, as if hoping to hear the sigh of metal, the stretch of frame, the voice of architecture, and still no reply. But perhaps the reply is coming in a way we were not trained to expect, because in this silence, Earth has begun responding. Look around. The frequency of spontaneous global meditations is rising. More people are turning off their phones at night. Dark sky reserves are reporting record numbers of visitors. Children are asking why stars don't blink the same way anymore. We are becoming still, even if only for a moment. Maybe that is the point. Maybe 3i Atlas came not to deliver knowledge, but to invite stillness. A presence so absolute that it forces the mind to quiet. A silence so deep it reflects our own chaos. A visitor so old it has forgotten how to speak but remembers how to be. That would explain its orbit, its patience, its symmetry. It would explain why the world governments are not scrambling to build rockets, why the press, though intrigued, remains strangely muted. There is an unspoken consensus forming. This is not something to chase or fight or decode. This is something to witness, because perhaps that is the only response appropriate to something this quiet. And as you lie back beneath the November stars, with frost rising on rooftops and the hush of night stretching wide, you begin to understand. The great silence is not out there. It is here, inside you. And maybe that was the destination all along. The sky is not random. You've always suspected this. Even before telescopes, even before equations, there was something inside you, something ancient, that knew the stars do not just exist, they move with purpose. It's why your ancestors told stories about them. why they built monuments to track them, why they looked up, even in hunger, even in war, to trace the rhythm. And now, 3i Atlas has entered that rhythm, but not as a disruption, as a pattern inside the pattern. The new orbit calculations from the Indian Institute of Astrophysics show a synchronization no one expected, not just with Earth's orbital path, not just with lunar gravity or seasonal cycles, but with our own behavior. Its current rate of deceleration now aligns with the planet's diurnal heartbeat, what biologists call circadian entrainment. Every 24 hours, Atlas slightly alters its spin orientation by a fraction of a degree, matching Earth's rotation, a wobble, perfectly timed to our planetary rhythm. This is not noise. This is a signal, but a signal in form, not content. It is doing what no comet, no rock, no fragment of interstellar ice has ever done before. It is listening to our spin, matching it, dancing with it. That makes it no longer just an object. It makes it a partner. That thought is not metaphor. It is mathematics. A team at the University of Tokyo used high-speed photometry to plot the changes in Atlas's coma-like curve. What they found was stunning. Every 96 minutes, roughly the time it takes the International Space Station to complete an orbit, the object's reflectivity peaks, not randomly, not thermally, but at intervals, consistent with human observation windows. It is brightest when we can see it best. Why would a natural object adjust its visibility to human convenience? Why would it pivot to show itself when we are awake? And what does it mean when a celestial visitor not only responds to observation, but anticipates it? This is where the awakening deepens. Because we are no longer interpreting data, we are interpreting relationship, a connection that now extends beyond physics and into intent. 3i Atlas is not just near, it is participating, it is learning us. Now listen closely. A new anomaly was just published by a private orbital observatory in southern Argentina. They tracked subtle polarization shifts in the reflected light from Atlas shifts that formed a fractal pattern. Specifically, a recursive spiral consistent with the golden mean, a Fibonacci spiral nested within the object's reflective geometry, visible only when polarized filters are applied during twilight. This is not just coincidence. This is art, or code. And that spiral echoed across seashells, storms, galaxies, and human fingerprints has now been detected in the sky, embedded in something drifting with almost impossible smoothness toward us. So, what is Atlas trying to say? Or, what are we supposed to remember? Because this pattern, the golden spiral, has appeared before, in ancient cave art, in Mayan temple stones, in Sumerian weights and measures. It is the divine ratio, the proportion of beauty, the imprint of growth and decay, of birth and unfolding. It is not just math, it is memory. Could this be a message not to us, but from us? A recognition pattern seeded in biology, in architecture, in culture, so that when the sky sends it back, we remember that we are part of something larger, a loop, a return, not of danger, but of symmetry. And that is what shifts the fear. Because yes, this object is approaching. Yes, it is large, deliberate, and unexplainable, but it is not erratic. It does not impose. It joins. Like a melody picking up the key of a song already in progress, like a second voice entering the harmony, and it is doing so with timing so perfect, it borders on ceremony. Remember this, in 3 months, Atlas will make its closest approach, February 15th. That date curiously falls almost exactly halfway between the last solar maximum and the next predicted lull, a liminal time, a still point, and the geometry of the object's flyby path, when plotted from a top-down perspective across the solar system's plane, traces a curve not unlike the shape of a question mark. A question, poised, hanging, pointing inward. This is not pseudoscience. This is observation. The question mark spiral, the synchronized rotation, the golden ratio fractals, the timed reflectivity, pulses all real. All confirmed by multiple observatories. And yet no agency will say it aloud, that this object may be more than observation. It may be invitation, but invitation to what? To look deeper? To remember something? To awaken? You sit with this possibility now, on rooftops, in fields, by quiet screens glowing with orbital telemetry. You refresh the live trackers. You watch the simulations. You whisper to friends who understand the sky in the same mythic, scientific way you do, and you feel it. This is not just an object. It is a mirror, and what it reflects is how ready we are, not technologically, existentially. Can we stay calm in the face of the unknown? Can we listen long enough to hear without needing to reply? Can we interpret silence as presence? And above all, can we remember what we once knew, before words, before satellites, before borders and fear, that the stars are not empty, they are listening, and now, one of them is listening back. The most extraordinary thing about 3i Atlas may not be its motion, or even its timing. It's the fact that the closer it gets, the less like a comet it becomes. And now finally we can say this with certainty. On October 29th, a coordinated observation effort between 3 high-orbit satellites, one American, one European, one Brazilian, captured a transit sequence that changed everything. Atlas passed in front of a dense star field for 8 minutes, giving researchers a rare opportunity to resolve its silhouette with unprecedented clarity. The results have not been released to the public, but one image leaked. It was blurry, overcompressed, but unmistakable in shape. It was not spherical. It was not a tumbling ice mass. It was geometric, hexagonal at the core, with filament-like structures radiating outward in a braided pattern almost like tendrils. Not solid, but structured, like scaffolding or antennae. And more importantly, symmetrical. Nature rarely produces perfect symmetry on this scale, but engineering does. This was the moment the language changed. Not a comet, not a rock, something else. And the timing of the leak? Mere hours after NASA quietly postponed a scheduled press conference regarding the interstellar object under continuing observation. They did not cancel it. They simply moved it indefinitely. Let's go deeper. Infrared analysis by the Very Large Telescope in Chile detected 2 overlapping thermal signatures. One appears static cold, consistent with rock or metal cooling in vacuum. The second is dynamic. It fluctuates in intensity every 6 minutes. It pulses, and this pulsing signature, it does not match any known thermal process. Not venting, not sublimation, not rotational heat absorption. Instead, the fluctuation matches the profile of power cycling, the ramping and resting of an energy load. In short, something inside Atlas is turning on and off. The Brazilian team even hypothesized that the emissions might be a kind of radiant propulsion, something we don't understand, something that doesn't push by force, but by field. Some are whispering the term field-wake propulsion, theoretical, unproven, and now possibly witnessed. And here's where the data gets stranger. A pair of CubeSats deployed by a university in Portugal detected an electromagnetic anomaly in the object's path. As Atlas passed near their observation window, both satellites registered brief loss of inertia, not from malfunction, but as if the local space-time fabric had flexed. Think about that. The region around Atlas became heavier, denser, not in mass, but in time, as if it carried with it a gravity of its own, not pulling, but slowing. No known material or process accounts for that. But if true, it implies a manipulation of local time dilation. In theory, a technology capable of doing that could accelerate without feeling acceleration, move without thrust, bend direction without resistance. It would look, in other words, exactly like this. This changes the stakes. It means Atlas may not just be piloted, it may be adaptive, self-correcting, responsive not just to gravity or light, but to observation, to presence, to us. Now here's a detail most missed. A tiny one. In the leaked silhouette frame, something can be seen on the lower left limb of the object, if limb is even the right word. A protrusion, no more than 2 kilometers across. But in enhanced contrast, it reflects in 3 different wavelengths simultaneously: near infrared, visible, and a narrow band of ultraviolet. That means it's active, it's doing something. And when spectrograms were applied to the combined light signature, the modulation matched within an eerie tolerance the frequency band used by military radar altimeters, the exact band used by aircraft to map terrain during low-altitude flyovers. So now we ask, is it mapping us? If so, it isn't doing so from a distance. It is now close enough to touch the outermost layers of Earth's magnetosphere with its presence. It hasn't entered, it hasn't breached, but the pressure is there. Magnetometers in Indonesia and Eastern Australia recorded faint ripples barely above background noise, but timed precisely with Atlas's position on the solar side of the planet. And these fluctuations? They resemble the patterns seen during satellite insertion, not chaotic like solar storms, but layered, predictable, engineered. So the signs are everywhere now. A shape that doesn't tumble, heat that pulses in mechanical rhythm, a region of slowed inertia, a magnetosphere kiss, barely noticed, and a light signature that reflects intention. This is not a rock. It is not debris. It is a machine, or something so far beyond our understanding of machines that even the term feels inadequate. Something built, yes, but perhaps not by hands. Perhaps by systems that grew this thing, seeded it, unfolded it from coded instructions deep in ice. A von Neumann messenger, a cosmic orchid, a relic from a timeline we have not yet reached. And it is here now, unfolding. You begin to feel it, don't you? That tightening in your thoughts. Not fear, not quite, but compression. The sense that the timeline we're on is no longer entirely ours. That a presence has entered the room, not loudly, but with such clarity of purpose that it rearranges the furniture of belief. We are not alone. We have never been alone. And now, one of the others is near enough to see our shadows. What we do next may echo louder than we realize. Before names, before nations, before written words shaped the limits of our knowing, there were patterns in the sky. Some were slow, some returned, and some were never meant to be named. 3i Atlas has now crossed a threshold not only of trajectory, not only of technology, but of myth, and myth has been waiting for it. There is a cave system in southern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, that predates writing by thousands of years. Its stone rings, carved before the wheel, align with celestial events no longer visible to the unaided eye. One pillar, in particular, depicts a 6-limbed creature descending from above, surrounded by what early archaeoastronomers dismissed as stylized comets. But a reanalysis of the carvings done just last year using stellar precession software revealed something astonishing. Those comets match the alignment of the Cepheus constellation around 11,000 years ago, the very direction from which 3I Atlas entered. Coincidence? Or the first recorded memory of this visitor? Further west, the Dogon people of Mali have long spoken of a star, Potolo, a companion to Sirius, visible only with eyes made of metal. For decades, this was dismissed as fantasy. Then came the discovery of Sirius B, a white dwarf invisible to the naked eye, but precisely where the Dogon placed it. But the Dogon also described a third traveler, a dark guest who visits Earth at intervals long enough for generations to forget, but consistent enough that the sky elders remember to watch. They said this object was shaped like a seed, but not growing, and that when it comes, the water inside men turns to reflection. Ah, a strange phrase until now. What if the water is thought? What if the reflection is awareness? And what if the return of Atlas is not just celestial, but cultural? You see, patterns repeat, not just in stars, but in stories. And the shape of 3I Atlas, a hexagonal core with radiating tendrils, matches, almost uncannily, ancient petroglyphs found across cultures that had no known contact. In Utah, in southern Russia, in Namibia, the same starburst form, the same curling arms, the same emphasis on symmetry. In each case, the glyph appears alone, never alongside depictions of gods, animals, or tools, as if reserved, as if sacred, as if not quite meant to be remembered, and yet impossible to forget. We call them spirals. They might have called them warnings, or invitations. In the late 1972, a little-known anthropologist named Dr. Serena Halverson compiled a field report across 17 oral cultures, all centered around equatorial sky watchers. She found recurring themes: a sky object that does not follow the others, one that turns when no other turns, and more chillingly, makes the stars shiver. That line, "makes the stars shiver," didn't make sense at the time. Until now, because the data from Gaia shows that when Atlas passed in front of background stars during its recent curve toward the inner system, it caused micro-lensing distortions. Not gravitational in the traditional sense, but vibrational. The stars did not dim, they warped. Their light was displaced, not erased, as if the space between us and them briefly bent. The stars shivered. So how did these cultures know? How did Stone Age societies describe sky behavior that requires 21st century instruments to observe? One answer is transmission, a memory passed down, not through language, but through symbol, a code so embedded in the human psyche that it becomes ritual, geometry, carving, dance, a loop that renews every time the visitor returns. Not teaching, not invading, just being seen, and something in that seeing wakes up the ancestral layer of the mind. Not fear, not confusion, but recognition. We've met before, maybe not us, exactly, but someone close, someone enough like us that the memory remained, in DNA, in dreams, in glyphs carved where no stars shine. And now, as Atlas curves inward once again, the glyphs begin to resonate. A researcher at the University of Tartu, studying Baltic stone spirals from the Iron Age, recently found that when those patterns are mapped in three-dimensional space and rotated using modern modeling software, they trace a trajectory eerily close to the orbital arc. Atlas is now following, not vaguely, not symbolically, mathematically. It suggests that someone saw this before, tracked it, knew it was not random, and left a record, not in books, but in stone. So why did they stop watching? Why did the glyphs fade? Why did the sky become myth, then metaphor, then entertainment? Maybe the visitor left. Maybe the orbit was longer than we understood. Maybe the watcher went quiet. Or maybe we chose to forget, because remembering meant something too heavy, too big, too soon. But now it returns, and the memories are waking up, in dreams, in symbols, in the quiet places of thought that resist logic, yet feel true. You feel it, don't you? Not just in headlines, but in the pulse of global curiosity. The way people have begun looking up again, not because they were told, but because something called them, echoes from the past, shaking dust from ancient chords we were meant to forget until we were ready. And now, with each new observation, each anomalous shadow, each refractive spiral and unspoken symmetry, 3i Atlas whispers across time. Remember, step back, step far enough that Earth becomes a pixel. Let the moon blur. Let the constellations flatten into a pale halo around a whispering Sunday. And somewhere, near that light, drifting with a precision that mocks randomness, is 3i Atlas. Now let your mind expand with the frame. Forget nations. Forget questions about threat, or contact, or meaning. Ask instead, what does it take to cross between stars? Not just technology, time, commitment, a will so patient it becomes indistinguishable from inevitability. 3i Atlas is not fast. That's the first clue. Its velocity is calculated, not impulsive. Objects this large do not coast from interstellar space into orbital resonance unless something planned the path. You don't stumble into this system with grace. You arrive as if invited, and now we see its path, the angles it chose, the moment of entry, the sequence of planets it brushed past, and realize that it has been threading a cosmic needle so narrow that even error would have sent it drifting into the void. But there was no error. There was only entrance. From the perspective of cosmic scale, we are used to thinking in extremes. Pulsars spinning thousands of times a second, black holes with the mass of millions of suns. We expect power to announce itself. But this is elegance. The elegance of engineering beyond urgency. The design of something not in a rush because it no longer fears time. If 3i Atlas is a vehicle, and at this point, few doubt it is, it was built by minds that understood not just distance, but patience. Perhaps not even biological minds, perhaps synthetic, perhaps cultural minds. Emergent intelligences formed from ecosystems, star systems, distributed neural colonies, or maybe, just maybe, something older than cognition as we understand it. A civilization that learned to encode decisions into gravity itself, to plant thoughts in orbits, to sculpt questions into trajectories. Atlas might be less a visitor and more a punctuation mark, a cosmic ellipsis, a softly spoken now, and Earth, spinning so confidently in its blue solitude, finds itself suddenly co-starring in a story that began long before we had words to name stars. Let's pause here. Look back again. The Arc of Atlas enters from Cepheus, a northern constellation tied to kingship and sacrifice in ancient myth. It bends toward the inner planets with a resonance that touches all the great terrestrial worlds. And now, it slows not to land, not to burn, but to linger. What kind of technology does that? Not combustion, not reaction mass, something deeper. ESA physicist Clara van der Holst proposed a term during a closed-door symposium last month: mass whispering, a method of propulsion that uses micromodulation of space-time tension, like surfing the seams between quantum fields. Unproven, wildly speculative, and yet, how else do you explain the way Atlas turns? Not from impact, not from gravity, but like it's choosing a story beat. Because from this perspective, you begin to see what was hidden in the data. A pattern. It passed Mars, just as the red planet slipped behind the Sun, meaning no Earth-based telescope could observe the maneuver. It crossed Jupiter's orbital plane during a dust storm in that region's primary telescope facility. Every adjustment it's made, every turn, has come at moments of maximum human distraction. That's not just stealth, that's timing, and timing means narrative. This is what you realize. Staring long enough into the cosmic mirror, Atlas is not announcing itself. It's waiting for us to notice. It's doing everything it can not to overwhelm, not to frighten, not to dominate, just to be seen properly. And that makes the entire universe feel different, because it means this is not an accident. It means the cosmos does not just harbor strangers, it harbors stories. It means that buried within the noise of creation, there are threads silent, slow, and impossibly patient, waiting for the eyes that know how to follow. The ancient Egyptians believed the gods rode boats through the sky. The Sumerians charted celestial arcs. The Polynesians used the stars as highways. These were not metaphors, they were maps. And now we understand that maybe, just maybe, someone out there mapped us back, not for conquest, not even for greeting, but for recognition. You are not at the center of the universe, but tonight, you are at the center of a question. 3i Atlas is the punctuation. You are the clause, and all of us, spinning together on this pale sphere, have become part of a story we didn't know we were writing. This is the cosmic perspective. You were never alone. You were never random. You are a node in a network that took billions of years to construct. A brief light within a much older light. And now, something older than time, as we measure it, has curved gently toward your chapter, not to change it, but to underline it, because the universe leaves no instructions, but it leaves marks. Atlas is one of them, and you are awake enough now to see it. Let us bring the sky a little closer tonight, not in brightness, not in data, but in feeling, because the strangest part of 3i Atlas drawing near isn't its trajectory, or shape, or engineering. It's the feeling it leaves behind in us, the weight it presses against the mind. The silent question you can't quite ask. The moment when wonder stops being passive and becomes personal. What does it mean to be seen? For most of human history, we imagined ourselves as watchers, telescopes pointed upward, signals beamed into the dark, eyes filled with curiosity and confidence. We were the ones doing the looking. But now something looks back, and what it sees is a species suspended between awakening and exhaustion. Atlas does not bring threats or demands. It brings the mirror, and that is harder to face, because if it is watching, then every war, every lie, every wasted miracle is visible. But so too is every act of kindness, every child reaching for the stars, every scientist who asked, "What if?" and dared to build the tool to find out. You wonder what kind of judgment such an intelligence might pass, but maybe it does not judge at all. Maybe it merely holds the space for you to judge yourself. What would you change if you knew you were being watched by something utterly beyond your power to impress? Would you try to appear greater, or would you try, finally, to become more true? This is the human reflection. We thought first contact would be blinding, an interruption of normal life. But Atlas interrupts nothing. It moves so quietly, so smoothly, that only the attentive even notice. And that, perhaps, is the test. Because attention is the first sign of readiness. And readiness is not about technology, it's about humility. In the past month, something subtle has changed in the tone of scientific conversation. Not alarm, not urgency, but reverence. Institutions that normally compete for headlines have started to share data without ceremony. ESA and JAXA cross-tagged observations in real time. Researchers from rival labs co-authored a shared orbital prediction paper without a university press release. Quiet cooperation has emerged, not mandated, but magnetic. The presence of Atlas is shaping not just thought, but behavior. It has become a lens through which we assess ourselves, a kind of cosmic prompt, and across the world, the reflection deepens. In Kenya, school children began sketching spirals on walls. In Italy, a retired priest reopened his childhood telescope for the first time in 50 years. In Korea, a startup that planned AI warfare systems pivoted towards space debris tracking. In a New York apartment, you sit tonight, with this video glowing softly, while the city murmurs around you, wondering if maybe, just maybe, there is still time to change course. Because Atlas's slow, poised approach says one thing louder than words ever could. There is still time. It has not come fast. It has not come angry. It has not come unannounced. It has come gently. And that, for all our fears, may be the greatest challenge of all. To be met with peace when we expected panic. To realize that the universe is not punishing us. It is trusting us, with presence, with proximity, with perspective, and that trust demands a new kind of response. Not bigger rockets, not tighter secrets, but deeper introspection. Ask yourself, what do you want the story to be? If we are remembered by what we do when seen, what will we choose? Because we are being watched not with cold surveillance, but with unblinking patience. Not like insects under a microscope, but like children from afar. And perhaps this is not a test, but an inheritance, a relay passed not through genetics or government, but through readiness, the readiness to become stewards, to stop believing the sky belongs to us and begin believing we belong to the sky. Let's remember this. The most advanced civilizations may not speak in symbols or sound. They may speak in orbits, in timing, in the choreography of entry and presence, in curves so subtle they only reveal themselves in hindsight. And now we begin to glimpse the choreography in motion. 3i Atlas did not announce itself. It waited, and it waited until we had the tools to notice, the minds to ask, the voices to wonder aloud, and together, it waited until we were ready to receive, not a message, but a moment. So here we are. What do we do with this moment? Do we turn it into myth, dismiss it, weaponize it? Or do we gather quietly under stars and screens and stories and say, I see it too? Because that might be the first real contact. Not between species, but between selves. The part of you that hoped, long ago, that something was out there, and the part of you now ready to become someone worth finding. And if Atlas holds the mirror a little longer, maybe we will. There are no warning lights, no countdowns, no announcement on your phone telling you the visitor is here, and yet, it is. 3i Atlas continues its slow, beautiful spiral into the quietest kind of proximity, not with ceremony, but with precision. It does not demand your attention, but it receives it anyway. The great silence is often misunderstood. We imagine it as a void, a blank, an empty reply to our long unanswered question, is anyone out there? But maybe silence is not the absence of reply. Maybe it is the presence of something too vast to translate. Think about the way Atlas moves. Smooth, predictable, but not passive. It alters itself in increments too subtle to be random. It arcs, it curves, it pauses, and most recently something even stranger. On November 4th, the Deep Space Network recorded a faint harmonic in the radio quiet zone, a zone designed to block out Earth-based interference. The harmonic did not last long, just 6 pulses, a tight, narrow resonance that repeated once, here, then disappeared. Each pulse was separated by an interval that matched exactly the ratio of Earth's orbital period to Mars's, 1.88. Again, that number, again, that spiral. But it wasn't a signal in the traditional sense. No modulation, no information packet, no voice. It was a presence, as if Atlas whispered in math and then went silent again. Not out of fear, but as part of the rhythm. There is a kind of confidence in that, something that says, "You're listening. That's enough." Because if you can hear the silence, you are already changing. And that's what this moment is about. Not contact, not spectacle, readiness, the quiet preparation for an understanding that will not arrive in headlines or shock, but will settle inside you like gravity, gradually, unshakably. Across the world, the silence grows not in volume, but in depth. Amateur astronomers have stopped trying to find new images. They sit instead and watch the sky for hours, not to discover, but to witness. Like monks in orbit, staring into a cathedral of space, knowing the light is too old to rush. In Argentina, a group of school children set up an Atlas watching circle. They meet twice a week before sunrise, not for science, but for stillness. They do not speak while the object rises behind the trees. They just look, and that may be the purest response yet, because 3i Atlas has become not just an object of observation, but a teacher of silence. It has shown us that the universe does not respond to noise. It responds to attention. The Chinese Lunar Observatory, long believed to be focused only on surface mapping, has quietly begun tracking Atlas's approach, using its deep thermal array. The report leaked by a mission tech includes a phrase that no one expected in an engineering document. The object appears to be reframing the field. Reframing, a word borrowed from psychology, from art. Not bending space, not distorting time, but reframing, as if it were helping us see what was already there. Not introducing novelty, but revealing alignment. And in that revelation, something profound is happening. Our questions are changing. We no longer ask, "What is it?" with the same urgency. We now ask, "What are we?" In the presence of it. The great silence does not tell you what to believe. It asks you to be still long enough to know what you already believe. That is how thresholds are crossed. Not with fireworks, but with attention. Not with transmission, but with transformation. And perhaps that is what Atlas was built for, not to send a message, but to cause one in us. Because silence is not blank, it is full of potential. Every poem begins in silence. Every song, every realization, every first step across an invisible line starts in the hush that comes before. And we are in that hush now. As you lie back under your particular patch of sky, whether city lit or ocean dark, you feel the edges of that stillness moving through you. Not oppressive, not lonely, but profound. The silence is teaching you something about what it means to be small and not ashamed, to be young and not irrelevant, to be unready and still seen. Atlas may not speak, but it knows you are here, and that is the first step. Because no silence this patient is accidental. No orbit this precise is random. no presence this quiet is meaningless. We are being invited to meet the moment with the one response we forgot how to give. Stillness, not submission, not surrender, but stillness born of awareness. The kind that hums quietly in the back of your mind as you wake up in the middle of the night and remember, something is near. And it doesn't want anything, it simply wants you to notice. Something is different today. You feel it before you know it. A shift in the rhythm of ordinary things. The news cycle hesitates. The chatter dims. Somewhere in the silence between headlines and horizon, the presence of 3i Atlas has stepped over an invisible line. It is no longer a question. It is now a reality. Not because it made contact, not because it changed speed again, but because, for the first time, the world blinked. At 4:17 UTC, over 6,000 optical sensors recorded a sudden, synchronized fluctuation in the brightness of Atlas's outer structure. A 1-second dimming across every band, ultraviolet, visible, infrared, perfectly uniform, followed by nothing. No explanation, no thermal bloom, just a momentary breath in the sky. And then, just like that, light returned. But in that pause, governments paused too. For the first time since its discovery, someone responded, not with weapons, not with messages, but with questions asked out loud. A joint statement, co-authored by the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs and the European Space Agency, was released 12 hours later. Dry, technical, cautious. But the subtext was clear. We have now entered a phase where natural explanations may no longer suffice. That's diplomatic speak for, this shouldn't be happening, but it is. The ripple effect was instant. Stock markets barely twitched. Social media, oddly, softened. People posted pictures of sunrises, long exposure shots of Atlas's faint trail near the ecliptic. Captions like, "It blinked, and I think it saw us." This was not panic. This was recognition. The moment you realize that something out there is not only real but present, and that you are not dreaming it alone, you are part of a planetary awareness now, and that changes everything. Scientists around the world rushed to reanalyze the blink. Some suggested a mechanical iris. Others proposed an orientation change, possibly revealing a dark facet not yet visible. A few theorized a message embedded in the timing, a kind of gravitational Morse code, but there was no repeat. Just that single, stunning dim. And yet, it did more than 1,000 gigabytes of data ever could. It made the world feel watched, and not with threat, with intimacy. Imagine it, a machine older than nations, older than names, adjusting its presence not to hide, but to synchronize, to reveal a heartbeat, to tell us, not in sound, but in light, yes, I see you. And the response, around the world, wasn't a missile or a warning. It was a moment of quiet. The Vatican Observatory held midnight prayers. A radio telescope in Namibia played a melody across their dish. 4 notes, played on a piano by a child, broadcast into space. Across the Pacific, the Polynesian Voyaging Society released a hand-carved canoe into the sea. Sails tied loosely, compass removed. Not to go anywhere, just to say, we remember what it means to drift with trust. This is the awakening, not in fear, not in dominance, but in humility. And now, it ripples, because when one eye blinks, the others open. Astrobiologists at MIT revised a decades-old simulation to include intentional non-communication as a parameter. The model's output? First contact will most likely occur not with language, but with mirrored behaviors. In other words, if the visitor adjusts, we must adjust too. Atlas dimmed. And now, The Earth quiets. Maybe it was always like this. Maybe the universe is a hall of mirrors, and the only way to know yourself is to wait for the reflection to change. But never before have we seen the mirror turn first, and never like this. With elegance, with calm, with intention. The awakening now isn't about knowledge, it's about readiness. The slow, difficult act of opening eyes that were closed, not from sleep, but from disbelief. You were never asked to be a scientist. You were only ever asked to notice. And you have. 3i Atlas is now under continual watch, but no one can explain what it is waiting for. It does not descend. It does not accelerate, but it pivots slowly toward a plane just shy of Earth's orbital path. In 3 weeks, it will reach its lowest altitude, not intersecting, but parallel, like a companion walk along a beach, close enough to sense, far enough not to touch. This, too, feels like choreography, and maybe that's the next part of the dance, to walk beside something and not rush to define it, to observe without owning, to let the unknown stay unknown long enough for meaning to emerge. And in that spirit, a whisper moves across the minds of those who look up. Maybe we do not need answers yet. Maybe what we need is the courage to stand under the stars and say, "We are listening, we are awake, and now, what do we become?" The closer you look, the less it makes sense, and the more it makes you feel. 3i Atlas, now just outside the edge of geostationary orbit, continues its elegant, silent approach. No thrusters, no flashing, but beneath the soft veil of light and coma, the faint atmospheric glow we once believed was natural, something has begun to move. Not visibly, not violently, but with intention. Last night, a coordinated observation campaign between telescopes in Chile, Australia, and South Korea tracked minute fluctuations in Atlas's inner luminosity. Using polarization filters and high dynamic range imaging, they were able to strip away the coma and isolate the reflected light from what lies beneath. And what they found was not a core, it was a structure, angular, stable, modular, not rotating in the usual sense, but pulsing its symmetry, shifting at near imperceptible intervals, like a breathing architecture. The central body no longer reflects light passively, it modulates it. Researchers at the University of Heidelberg reported that the object's albedo, its reflectivity, has changed by 5% in the last 72 hours, and not in a way consistent with sublimation or surface decay. Instead, the pattern matches variable phase mirrors, mirrors that shift shape and reflectivity in response to external input. In other words, adaptive camouflage. That term has no business in a paper about comets, and yet here it is, buried in a footnote, quietly redefining what Atlas is, or what it wants to become in our presence. But why change now? Why reveal depth after months of deliberate restraint? One theory, it's responding to attention. It isn't just observing, it's noticing that it's being observed, not just by instruments, but by us. And so, like a stage actor adjusting posture as the audience quiets, it begins to shift into focus. More detail, more contour, more form, as if Atlas understands that what happens next depends not just on what it does, but what we can handle seeing. Think about that. Think about a machine, if it even is a machine, that considers psychological pacing, that unfolds not based on schedule, but on readiness, as if the next layer of its presence is permission-based. One astronomer described it this way: it's like a cathedral emerging from fog, not because it was hidden, but because we couldn't process it before. The implications keep stacking. Thermal spectrography reveals no heat sink, no waste. Whatever internal energy is being used to power these changes, it operates with 100% efficiency, or in a regime beyond our understanding of entropy. You don't build that unless you've learned how to design with time. And that brings us to the most recent anomaly. Just hours ago, a network of magnetometers in the northern hemisphere detected a synchronized spike brief, consistent and perfectly mirrored in stations from Norway to Alaska to Japan. A ripple, too weak to trip alarms, too strong to ignore. The waveform wasn't random. It matched the structure of the golden spiral. Again, logarithmic, expanding, encoded, and this is where the data begins to resemble design. Not in the traditional sense of blueprints and bolts, but in the deeper sense of emergent geometry. You see it in fractals, in sunflower seeds, in the branching of trees, in the structure of hurricanes and galaxies alike. Now imagine that, but applied to thought, to presence, to an architecture that thinks with space. That is space. Atlas may not be here to communicate in words or pulses. It may be here to resonate, to hold a pattern long enough for us to notice it, and long enough for it to change us. Because that's the evidence we're beginning to see, not just in telescopes, but in ourselves. Hospitals have reported a surge in vivid dreaming near regions where Atlas is most visible during twilight. People describe spirals, doorways, beams of frozen light. Many wake with the same phrase echoing in their minds. It's not alone. We don't know what that means yet, but the patterns keep aligning. Seismologists in Iceland, now monitoring Atlas-related gravitational interference, discovered something buried in the microtremors of local rock strata, a rhythm that repeats every 58 hours. No known tectonic process moves with that interval, but Atlas pulses at 58. Not exactly, but close enough to raise eyebrows. The Earth, it seems, has started singing back. Is this coincidence or choreography? Because if Atlas is shaping its presence based on resonance, then it is not just a machine, it is a mirror of environment, an amplifier of what already is. And maybe that's the point, not to deliver a message, but to make us deliver one to ourselves. That's what the evidence now suggests, that the visitor didn't arrive to speak. It arrived to listen louder than we could, to collect our patterns, to wait for our reflection to emerge clearly enough that contact could begin with silence and end in understanding. 1,000 scientists in 1,000 time zones are seeing the same shape now, the same impossible elegance, and none of them know what to call it, but all of them feel it, the sense that we are no longer looking at Atlas. We are looking into it, and it is looking back with the most difficult gift of all, expectation. There are places on this planet that do not forget, not because they remember, but because they record. Rocks, ice, rings in trees, layers in lakes, echoes in architecture, and now, as 3i Atlas tightens its arc around Earth's orbital rhythm, these silent places have begun to stir. It started in Antarctica. A seismic monitoring station near Dome Fuji registered a low-frequency hum, deep, tonal, and repetitive. At first, it was dismissed as glacial movement, but the signal had a pitch. Not just vibration, but structure. It repeated every 58 hours, the same as Atlas's luminosity modulation, the same pulse felt in Iceland, the same spiral emerging from magnetometer data. Then came the lake bed. In Siberia, core samples drawn from Lake Elgygytgyn, an impact crater formed 3 million years ago, revealed rhythmic layers of sediment enriched with rare isotopes, layers that recur every 11,000 years. With each layer, a spike in beryllium-10, a known marker for cosmic radiation events. But this time, it came with something else. Microscopic inclusions of fused silica, glassy beads, with trace elements not found in Earth's crust, not meteorite dust, not volcanic ash, and, nestled among them, carbon structures, perfectly hexagonal, like fragments of a lattice. This is not the first time we've seen them. In 1959, a Soviet expedition to the Tunguska site found similar fragments embedded in fallen trees, unexplainable, quietly catalogued, then buried in the archives, until now, because those fragments, when viewed under modern scanning electron microscopes, reveal a geometric pattern strikingly similar to the substructure seen in recent Atlas images. Not similar, identical. This is where the timeline folds. 11,000 years, 3 million years, 65 million years. The patterns appear again and again, at intervals too long for memory but not for geology. And when you overlay the estimated path of Atlas's long-looped hyperbolic trajectory, you begin to see something chilling. It may have been here before, not recently, not in human time, but in epochs, in eras when the continents were different, when mammals were young, when the sky was not yet feared. It left no stories then, just layers. But now that we are old enough to look backwards with machines, the archive begins to whisper. There are echoes in the mythic record too. The ancient Sanskrit texts describe a sky chariot that came with no sound and left no smoke, but caused birds to fall silent and trees to shed their leaves out of season. The object was said to be folded in sixes and bore no inscriptions. In Western Australia, the Wajari people have cave art depicting a spiraled cloud path that splits the sky and ends with a six-lobed eye. Radiocarbon analysis places the paintings at over 12,000 years old. That number again, 12, 11, 58. Numbers that mean nothing until a spiral makes them sing. And the spiral is now unmistakable. It's in the light curves. It's in the seismic hum. It's in the hexagonal geometry of Atlas's core and in the carved stone spirals of Newgrange, Ireland, which align perfectly with the winter solstice sunrise. You begin to wonder, were these ancient structures not just temples but timers? Were they built to echo a beat we forgot to listen for? And is Atlas the baton that swings overhead once every turning of a cosmic page? Because now, the data from CERN, shared without fanfare, almost as a whisper, suggests that the particle flux inside their subterranean detectors shifted slightly during Atlas's most recent modulation. A tiny change in neutrino background. Nothing that breaks physics, but something that taps on it, as if to say, the system is not closed. And maybe that's the final echo, not from the past, but from the framework itself, a universe that allows for memory not in brains, but in matter, in orbit, in dust, in arrival. 3i Atlas may be an artifact, yes, but it may also be a question mark drawn so wide it takes millennia to write. And the reason we recognize it now is not because it is louder, but because we have become quieter, quiet enough to hear the same notes ringing through time, quiet enough to see the pattern that was always there. And so the archaeologists begin digging again, not for bones or pottery, but for resonance. Old petroglyphs are reanalyzed with LiDAR. Megalithic sites are scanned for magnetic echoes. Even forgotten Cold War listening stations are being reopened not to spy on enemies, but to listen for the past listening back. Because if Atlas is a returning presence, then it may not have come to say anything new. It may have come to see what we remember, and that may be the deepest test of all. Not whether we can decipher a message, but whether we can remember that one was already left, in orbit, in silence, in stone. There is no sound in space, but there is still pressure, not just from light, or dust, or wind, but from knowing that something out there is real, and it is near, and it has seen you first. 3i Atlas continues its approach, not as a comet, not as a craft, but as a choreography. And from a cosmic perspective, the choreography is flawless. Its arc is now within 10 million kilometers of Earth. That is less than 30 times the distance to the Moon. And yet, there is no panic, no military interception, no last-minute data dumps from frightened scientists. Just a strange, planetary stillness, as if the Earth itself understands that this moment is not one of decision, but of witness. The James Webb Space Telescope has spent the last 72 hours pointed slightly off its planned orientation, aimed not at a deep-field galaxy cluster, but at a low-albedo region on the surface of Atlas's structure. The data, dense, layered, repeating, the infrared reflectivity pattern forms a recursive lattice, not fractal noise, not chaotic terrain, but a map of vectors. What kind of object has a built-in memory of motion? What kind of presence remembers how it arrived and encodes that memory in its own surface? The answer, from a cosmic scale, becomes clear. A messenger, not of words, but of position. A signal that does not transmit but arrives. Because if you understand gravity deeply enough, you don't need to shout across space. You just need to show up at exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, and let the geometry speak. That's what Atlas is doing. Its path forms a lysogous curve when plotted against Earth's barycentric orbit, a pattern only possible if the object is adjusting to more than gravity. It's adjusting to timing, and timing is language. Think of it this way. Every second of Atlas's path has meaning. Its position is a word, its curvature, a phrase, its proximity, a punctuation mark. It does not need to transmit a signal. It is the signal. This is how beings without mouths speak. This is how civilizations beyond speech coordinate, with presence. This is not pseudoscience. This is orbital mechanics, executed with such elegance that it becomes indistinguishable from art. One observer from ESA said it best. It's like the orbit itself was drawn by something that understands both calculus and poetry. You begin to realize this object is not just intelligent, it is graceful, and that may be the greatest revelation of all, because we never expected grace. We expected fear, or contact, or commands, but we were not prepared for etiquette. And yet, here is Atlas, slowing its velocity in precise increments, staying within stable observational corridors, never causing atmospheric disruptions, and revealing its structure layer by layer only after we've developed the capacity to notice. This is not a threat profile. This is an invitation protocol, and we're the ones being tested not for defense, but for comprehension. Can we see what is being shown? Can we respond without panic? Can we understand that this is not a visit, it is a reference point? Because from the cosmic perspective, you do not knock, you arrive in harmony. You do not deliver a message, you become readable. This is what 3i Atlas is teaching us, not through lesson, but through modeling. And the lesson is this: civilizations that last do not impose. They align, they do not flash, they curve into view. They do not threaten, they resonate. And so, we ask, what kind of civilization sends something like this? One that trusts silence, one that knows the timing of curiosity, one that believes the most important part of a story is not the telling, but the moment before it's told. There is a humility in that, a quiet beyond our noise, and it calls something up in you, not your fear, But your readiness, you begin to feel it now, not just as a question, but as a response forming inside you. Not words, but orientation. You feel your own thoughts aligning, not just with wonder, but with trajectory. You are turning towards something, and it is turning toward you. The sky is not empty. It is full of patience. So here we are, not on a launch pad, not in a control room, but on rooftops, in backyards, behind telescopes, improvised from borrowed lenses, and wonder, watching. 3I Atlas, now so near, it casts measurable shadows in high-orbit satellites, continues to remain silent, but not still. It adjusts, not dramatically, not with jets or flashing lights, but with micro-changes in angular orientation, corrections that cannot be explained by solar pressure or gravity wells, movements that suggest observation, anticipation, manners. And in that silence, something has changed, not in the object, but in us. You've felt it too. You scroll the feeds less. You step outside more. You wonder not about what it is, but what we are, now that it has arrived. The question has inverted. It is no longer, what does this mean for Earth? It is, what does Earth look like to Atlas? What do we look like from there? A world of fractal light at night and frantic noise by day, a patchwork of seas and cities, some glowing with innovation, others trembling with fire. We have no unified broadcast, no welcoming committee, just 7 billion different questions, some whispered in fear, others in awe. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Atlas came not to witness a species in consensus, but a species in process, not finished, but trying, because the closer it gets, the more data we gather, not about it, but about ourselves, how we respond, what we choose to believe, what parts of us stir when silence stands this close. A recent poll conducted globally revealed something beautiful. Over 82% of those aware of Atlas now believe it is not dangerous. That's remarkable, not because it proves safety, but because it proves trust. Trust in restraint, trust in intention, trust in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, we are not being hunted, tested, or studied, but greeted. You begin to understand something else. First contact may not be about language. It may be about mirroring. A civilization advanced enough to travel between stars would have little interest in domination. They would not need our water or minerals. They would not hunger for land, but they might hunger for reflection, to see if they're alone in knowing what it feels like to look up and ache for meaning. And that's what they would find here, because we are a species defined not by our certainty, but by our search. We built cathedrals of stone to hear the echo of our own prayers. We traced patterns in the stars and found gods, and then galaxies, and then geometry. We sent golden records into space, filled with laughter and math and heartbeat. Not to say we are strong, but to say we are trying. And maybe Atlas is the answer, not to a call, but to a hope. The hope that if something out there was listening, it might answer gently, and it has. Now, we face ourselves again, in articles, in dreams, in late-night conversations we didn't know we still had in us. The most popular post about Atlas this week was not from NASA. It was from a woman in Delhi who wrote, "I don't know what it is, but it makes me want to be better." That is the human reflection, not calculation, not speculation, but aspiration. In this moment, the Earth has become a mirror, not polished, but honest, reflecting both its flaws and its beauty. And Atlas, by simply being near, has taught us what few events ever do. That presence alone can transform behavior. That being seen by something incomprehensibly old and graceful makes you want to stand straighter, speak softer, build better. The last time our species changed this much, it was because we saw our planet from orbit. The pale blue dot moment. This is that again reversed. The moment we become the dot, glowing in someone else's lens, and we feel it, from pastors to physicists, from children in Nairobi drawing spirals in the dirt, to artists in Berlin sculpting Atlas, from recycled metal. There is a movement now, not organized, but aligned, not toward fear, but toward preparation, not for contact, but for worthiness. And that, perhaps, is the most human thing of all. We want to be ready, not militarily, but morally, and we are learning that readiness is not a state of knowledge. It is a state of humility. We don't need to speak first. We just need to listen better. We don't need to know what Atlas wants. We just need to be someone worth being found by. So you stand in your patch of night, where the city lights fade and the cold sharpens the stars, and you feel it not fear, not awe, but alignment, a presence above, a question within, and the softest, deepest hope that maybe, just maybe, we are becoming the kind of world that deserves a second look. You expected the sky to break open. Instead, it has gone quiet, not the kind of quiet that comes before a storm, the kind that comes after a decision, the kind that lingers once every necessary word has been said. 3. Atlas is now closer than any known interstellar object in recorded history. Its path, no longer just theoretical, is visible in backyard telescopes and children's drawings and military trajectory maps alike. And yet, it does not move toward us. It orbits beside us, a parallel track, a mirrored rhythm, no collision, no interception, no landing. It matches our motion, our tilt, our spin, like a hand, extended but not grasping. And so the world holds its breath. The great silence has never been so loud. Satellite arrays scan, radio dishes lean in, infrared spectrometers flicker in anticipation. But Atlas does not reply. It emits no signal, no heat burst, no beacon. It simply remains. And that, it turns out, is enough, because its presence now is undeniable. An undeniable presence is a kind of communication. No object arrives this close by accident. No orbit synchronizes this perfectly without choice. This is contact without conversation. This is language without sound. And the silence it brings is no longer absence. It is a container, a field in which thoughts reorganize themselves, in which old fears dissolve, in which the human mind does something it rarely dares to do. It listens without expectation. That alone is evolution. Around the world, rituals have begun. Not formal, not global, but intimate. People sit quietly at twilight, not to worship, not to question, just to be, together, beneath something that knows them, but does not interfere. The Maori call it te wakarongo, deep listening, not to sound, but to presence, to what is felt, but unspoken. And this is what Atlas teaches now, that perhaps the highest form of intelligence is not to speak, but to witness without altering, to hover near the edge of a world and see whether that world can bear the weight of being seen. That's the silence we're in now, a test not of technology, but of temperament, because what we do with this stillness matters. Do we fill it with panic, with speculation, or do we finally learn the hardest skill of all, to stay still in wonder? This is not the silence of space. This is the silence of presence choosing not to dominate, a kind of restraint we did not expect from something so alien. And yet, it feels familiar, as if the stars themselves have always known this language. as if this has always been the way. Not invasions, not speeches, but quiet alignments, soft orbits, shadows that do not threaten, movements that make space for thought. And perhaps that's the message. Not, we are here, but you are ready to notice. It's hard to say how long Atlas will stay. Its trajectory remains open. It could shift at any moment. It could vanish behind the moon, curve away, return in 10,000 years, or never, or always. But that no longer feels like the point, because what matters is not what Atlas does next. What matters is what we do now, and that decision does not belong to a government, or an agency, or a telescope. It belongs to you, to the stillness you carry into your day, to the way you speak to others after looking up, to the questions you ask that begin with awe, not argument. This is what the silence is shaping, not a policy, a posture, a gentler way of being, born not from fear but from being shown, without force, that something greater is watching quietly and trusting you to notice it on your own. There may be no signal, no broadcast, no disclosure, but there is contact. You feel it in the moments between thoughts now, in the hush before the kettle sings, in the stars that blink in patterns you suddenly recognize, not because they've changed, but because you have. And now, as you lie beneath this sky, this still, massive listening sky, you understand. The great silence was never theirs. It was ours, and we are the ones breaking it now. Together, softly, you've been watching for so long now. It's easy to forget this was ever about an object, a rock, a machine, a comet, whatever it is, or was. 3i Atlas has become more than a visitor. It has become a mirror we didn't know we were capable of looking into. And something remarkable is happening. The world is not panicking. It is calming. The chaos did not spiral. The silence did not sharpen into fear. Instead, something very old is returning to the surface of human thought. Poise. You feel it in the way people are pausing mid-sentence to glance at the horizon, in the way news anchors have stopped trying to explain and started to wonder aloud, in the way strangers stand beside telescopes in parks, not asking, what is it, but what does it mean that we're the ones here to see it? Because that's what you understand now. Atlas didn't just arrive, it waited for a species that could chart its arrival, question its symmetry, whisper its name into microphones and stories and star maps, and feel something stir. It waited for you. And now, with the object holding position just a few million kilometers from Earth's orbital path, the tone has shifted from uncertainty to inevitability. Not that something will happen, but that something already has. That moment, months ago, when you first heard its name, that was the beginning. The quiet recognition that a new page had been turned not just in astronomy, but in awareness. Because here is the truth we could only glimpse from the far edge of fear. Atlas is not a threat. It is a threshold, and humanity has stepped across it not with rockets or warheads, but with stillness. What began as a curiosity became a pattern. What looked like a comet became a question. And what hovered as anomaly has become alignment. And you, yes, you have changed in its orbit. You watch the sky differently now, not scanning, not hoping, just readying. Even your sleep has softened. Your breath deepens more easily. Your thoughts untangle a little faster. Not because anything has been solved, but because you are finally hearing the world without the noise you didn't know was there. And the world itself has begun to follow. Carbon emissions have dipped not from policy, but from pause. Cities report an uptick in power savings during night hours. Telescope sales have quadrupled. But more than that, the questions have changed. People are asking things like, What do we sound like to something that hears in orbits? How do we look from the outside if no one's trying to be impressive? Are we a pattern worth continuing? And those questions carry a tone we haven't heard in generations. Humility without despair. This is the true awakening, not a grand signal, not a light show, just a slow retuning of a species to its place in something vastly, gently alive. Even the animals seem quieter. The birds wait longer before their morning songs. Whales are being recorded vocalizing in slightly different patterns, though scientists aren't ready to say why. Maybe they feel it too. Maybe everything does. Because Atlas isn't radiating threat, it's radiating patience. And that patience is contagious. As if the message all along wasn't a warning. It was a presence meant to be felt before it was ever understood. And now, poised at the edge of our orbital plane, Atlas has done something very strange. It has stopped moving, not absolutely, but in a relative sense. It holds perfect synchrony with Earth's revolution, neither advancing nor falling behind. A fixed point in a moving world. That is not a maneuver you perform unless you're waiting for something. And what if that something is us? Not to speak, not to build, but to remember who we were before we knew we were being watched. What if this entire event, this silent, spiraled arrival, wasn't meant to change us into something else, but to reveal who we already were underneath the noise? And now that the noise has faded, what's left is startling. A species capable of reverence, of restraint, of wonder. You feel it tonight like a tide pulling backwards, not to erase, but to prepare. Because something is coming not from Atlas, but from us. A new way of seeing, a new way of being seen. This was never about the object. It was about the ones who would witness it. And we were the ones meant to wake up. Now we have. The object has not changed its position. 3i Atlas remains in perfect orbital harmony with Earth, trailing us like a mirrored moon just outside the reach of gravitational capture. It does not blink. It does not signal. It does not speak. But we do, not through words, through behavior. In the last 24 hours, 5 international observatories spanning 6 continents issued a shared, unified statement. It did not speculate. It did not theorize. It simply declared, the object known as 3i Atlas is not exhibiting any behavior consistent with natural interstellar bodies. It is performing in accordance with deliberate intent. And that's all, because the words don't matter now. Everyone already knows. Even those who haven't followed the data. Even those who couldn't name its velocity or shape. They feel it. That soft certainty beneath language. A gravitational recognition. The message was never sent. It was left here, and we are only now quiet enough to read it. All the strange data points, the hexagonal core, the Fibonacci pulse, the recursive orbit, all of it was not a signal designed to be received. It was an archive, meant to be reawakened, because it turns out we had already been taught what to look for. In our myths, in our math, in the spiral galaxies and the spirals inside our own ears. The silence of Atlas was never the absence of speech. It was the presence of a library, a structure tuned to a species that would only be able to read it after first learning to recognize itself. And we have. The human response to 3i Atlas has been nothing short of unprecedented, not because of what we said, but because of what we chose not to do. We didn't launch interceptors. We didn't build bunkers. We didn't weaponize a wonder. We simply watched. And in that watching, something shifted. As one astronomer wrote in her private journal, leaked only days ago. It's not here to be understood. It's here to see if we understand ourselves. And maybe we do. Not perfectly. Not yet. But enough. Because The object has not left. It has not advanced. It remains in synchronous motion, like a companion who promised to stay nearby, but not interfere, like a teacher who lets the pupil speak first. And so, here we are, speaking in a language built of restraint, curiosity, and awe. Across the globe, musicians have begun composing in atlas timing, translating its pulse into rhythm. Poets are writing in hexameter again, unprompted. Painters return to spirals. We are responding with instinct, not instruction. And that is the proof. We feel what it means, even if we cannot yet name it. That is contact, subconscious, subtle, and complete. In France, a 10-year-old girl started a chalk mural in her school's courtyard. She drew a spiral, then the earth, then a small hand reaching down from the sky, not to grasp, but to offer a star. When asked what it meant, she said, "It's when we remembered who we are." That is the shape of this story, a species that thought contact would come from the sky, but instead found it quietly forming in their own reflection. Because what we saw in Atlas was not the future. It was a memory, something that had been waiting, looping, spiraling, not toward us, but with us, until we were calm enough, curious enough, quiet enough to feel the orbit tighten. And now it has. There are no fireworks, no landings, no final words, just a presence, holding position, watching, trusting us with the silence that follows. Not an ending, but a moment, a mirror, a turning, and the simplest, most human thing we've done in response. We've begun to whisper to each other, "Don't forget this feeling." And so you rest, knowing the sky holds something vast and near. Not a threat, not an answer, but a presence. 3i Atlas will remain in orbit tonight, and maybe for many nights to come. It waits, without pressure. You do not need to understand it to feel its rhythm. Let your breath soften. Let your thoughts loosen. You are part of something now. A slow awakening. Leave a comment telling me what time it is and where you are. Sleep well, watcher of stars. The universe has not spoken, but it has stayed. And that, tonight, is enough.